Today we are talking about how to annotate the videos to support learning. Oftentimes when we try to, teacher use video a lot, right? Sometimes teacher, when they integrate the video in their teaching, they just let the students go through the video, which sometimes may not have the best results, the outcome they may expected. So today we'll talk about is using technology. When we try to integrate the video in our classroom, how can we enhance the function of the video, the role of the video in learning, help students to learn better, okay? We're going to talk about how you ask, what kinds of questions you can ask. And then we'll learn this software, it's called playposit, okay? So by the end of this class, you will identify and explain deep and shallow learning process and outcomes. So we talk about two different kinds of learning outcomes. One is shallow and one is deep learning outcomes. And what are they, right? We'll talk about it. The next is you will be able to differentiate between deep and shallow questions. Now, the first we talk about outcomes, deep and shallow. But now for how for example, to reach the deep processing and outcomes for your learners. And all it is related to the question you ask. If you ask shallow questions, probably you expect a shallow outcomes. If you ask a deeper question, the deep outcomes will be expected. And create a deep questions. Now we'll talk about deep question usually become more meaningful because it helps students to learn better. And here is how you create a deep level questions. Okay. And then the last one is how you integrate those videos into those questions and interaction into the video, which we'll talk about using the playposit. Okay. First, let's take a look at these two examples, okay? These are please take a close look at this video as I play them. Look at what kinds of questions teacher ask and what kinds of learner outcomes you already seen based on those questions, okay? Let's look at the first one.
What is geometry? And that's our new unit. We're going right into geometry. So take a minute to talk to your neighbor about what does geometry mean to you? What is geometry? What do you think about?
Shapes and angles. Angles, shapes, corners, sides. Basically anything to do with shapes. Yes. I have no clue how that goes with math, but
Okay. James, what did your partner say that geometry meant to them?
Geometry means like squares,
okay,
angles, what the degrees of the angles are, and that's all.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to stop here. Essentially, you got the idea, okay? So the teacher asked a question, what is geometry? What kinds of learning outcomes have you observed here? What do you see?
Well, you see the kids all discussing together with their partners what they think about it.
They think about it, okay? And what else? Thank you. Anyone else? What kinds of outcomes have you observed based on the video? Okay, keep that in mind, okay? And the next video, let's go to the next video. I'll still want you to look, okay? What questions teacher asked, and still try to think about this question. What outcomes the students that you can observe based on the video, okay?
And I want you to start talking to each other about what they have in common, how we could sort them. Go ahead.
Sort them by how many parallel edges they have.
Okay.
We could also sort them by how many right angles they have, or acute angles.
What else?
Sort them by size.
Yeah.
What do you mean size?
Like if one is really small and one is really big, then you can put the small ones and the big ones in different piles.
Can you get your hands in here and start doing that? And why don't you talk about what you see so that other people can add?
Versions of them.
Yeah, there are. Like this one, they're like the same shape, but this one's bigger and that one's like fatter, but smaller-ish.
So can we make some groups? Shay, what do you have over here?
Trapezoids.
Oh, how do you know that they're trapezoids?
Well, this is a square because they have one set of parallel lines and then the others will eventually cross.
Great, and what's that math word that we use for cross?
Intersect.
Intersect, great. So do you agree with Shay that these shapes have a name and that name is?
Trapezoid.
Great, so let me find in here my label that says trapezoid. All right, so we have one group of shapes.
Okay. Well, the teacher asked a lot of questions in this video, right? And the students' outcomes, there are different kinds of outcomes you already observed. Okay, can we discuss about it? What questions teacher asked and what kinds of the outcomes you observe? How it is these kinds of outcomes are different from the previous video? How are they different? Or they are same, probably. Anybody? Can you make some comments?
The students had manipulatives, so they were able to point out the sides and the angles and stuff, instead of in the last video where they were just kind of guessing and using knowledge off the top of their head.
Perfect. Anyone else?
Well, there seemed to be more guidance from the teacher in this one.
Yeah, the question is to become more scaffolding guidance, right? So now if you look at it, is here the students engage, like the teacher will ask them to group, right? When you ask them to group the things together, what kinds of process occur? The students try to compare and contrast and try to synthesize those manipulatives. They are in a similar features, right? So you kind of engage in a totally different level than the previous one. Whereas the previous one, and the teacher just asked the question and the student tried to recall, to describe what is triangle, right? What is geometry? The students try to remember what they have learned, right? This one purpose is not ask them to remember the things. The teacher's purpose is ask them to think about those angles, which they already learned, and how they are similar, how they are different. So engage in a totally different level is, comparison, analyzing those skills. That's the first one video described what we call the shallow level, okay, shallow level learning. The second one is described as the deep level learning. And in the classroom when we teach, we do want the students to memorize things, but we never stop there because that's not the ultimate purpose of learning, right? We want the students to utilize this knowledge, the knowledge they remember, and apply to things. For example, when in the second video, they start to compare and contrast, try to group them, they use their knowledge and they try to see, okay, these triangles are together similar. Why? So this is the kind of activity we describe as a deep level. So here we come to the topic of today, the questions for deep learning. The deep learning questions first is Walter Kinch, who is a professor at the University of Colorado. He described the knowledge form at a different level, he said, right? Not all learning is created equal. Some students learn at a shallow level, other at a deep level. Some learning is intended for the shallow level, just to remember things. Other learning is intended for engage in a deep level thinking. So there are, levels of knowledge, the knowledge representation will lead to the outcome. And a learner's cognitive processing determines how well knowledge is integrated. Uh, Cognitive processing means the way you think about it, right? If you just ask a simple question and then ask them to remember things, and the knowledge is just recall, right? But if you ask them to engage, analyze, synthesize, evaluate, right, to make inference, then the knowledge is integrated at a different level because they have to engage in a deep level thinking to see how and why I ask those questions. Here actually is a Bloom's taxonomy, which is widely used in education to describe different levels of learning activities or cognitive processes. We start with at the very bottom of this triangle. It's basically people start with trying to remember things, right? You want to remember if you learn like a multiplication, you need to remember the multiplication table. That's very basic. But you move on to the next level is what is a multiplication? You try to understand what does that mean, how it is different from the addition, or right? Then you move on to, instead of memorizing, you start to understand better, to understand the relationship between the two different variables in the multiplication. Okay. And then we usually want the students to apply. If you understand that you can remember the multiplication table, and you know the two different variables, for example, we can just, the rows and the columns usually, right? The rows can represent how many, the quantity, and the columns can represent a instant variable. Then you multiply two, then you get the results, right? And at a very abstract level, students understand, but you really want them to apply. So the application level is, we usually give them a lot of worksheets, started with just numbers, 2 plus 2 2 by 3, or 3 by 3. So students start to practice, but later you try to give them the problem solving, right? Then they will analyze, they understand, okay, if I have a 3 baskets, right? Each basket has 3 apples. How many apples I have, right? Then you start to give them the problem solving, and then they understand it better, rather than 3 by 3 equals 9. So this at a very abstract level. And the top 3 is become more advanced level. They ask them to analyze, to evaluate, and even at a create level. It's not just applied to elementary, secondary, even college, even people at the research area, right? How you think, how to create. So we as a teacher, we want to develop students' abilities at different levels, starting from their school time, not just we teach them knowledge and let them apply and analyze later, right? That's not the way. And actually, we want them to, at a very young level, we want to develop in themselves those abilities. So that's the taxonomy Bloom's defined, and actually it is used very widely in education. People develop their lesson plan based on Bloom's taxonomy. Okay. Now let's look at the shallow learning. First, the shallow learning is indicated by the outcome, the learning outcomes, such as remember, recall, paraphrase. And you look at this one on the left side, these are the names you try to remember. We teach the name and place, facts, concepts, dates, these, and we want them to remember. Deep level is different. You teach them these, but now we go to a deep level. We ask them why, right? Why the places like that? Why? Explain the facts, for example, how they're related, right? Find the reason, so on and so forth. So what we try to do is to determine the causal relationship. For doing this, we try to develop this ability. We require students to analyze, to apply, to synthesize, to infer, and to evaluate. Okay. So these are the 2 different levels, and just try to remember those keywords. These are the importance. You talk about the learning outcomes, And how you develop the question target at those level, right? Ask them to remember, or you target at this level that the students will analyze what kinds of question you want to develop. Let's look at this one, okay? Here, this is the first is in the shallow level question. Now, for example, this is the question is, by looking at the animals on the left, try to name them. Based on this question, what do you expect the students' outcome? They'll try to remember from what they have learned, right? And then they'll put down the words here, right? So obviously, this question is geared towards the shallow level. You just target at the remember, recall, and paraphrase. Let's look at this one. The deep learning, which is different from the previous example, is the cognitive process that's indexed by connecting to prior knowledge. So deep learning is when you try to ask those questions, you want to make sure that these, remember we target as students applying, analyzing, and then which means it has to relate to what they have already know, right? So make sure the question will tap into their prior knowledge and the question will help them to think between the lines. How can you develop these type of questions? And we will show you some examples, okay? And you try to develop this question that will ask students to search for key ideas and beyond, right? And the outcome is the students will synthesize information, make inference, create new ideas, so on and so forth, okay? Now here here's the first example I'm going to show you, okay? And you take a look at maybe just a minute, okay? Take a look at this content, the question. Here's the content. So this material is, teach the students about the function of the heart, right? The blood flows, okay? And then we're going to look at some questions, okay? The first question is, the teacher asked this kind of question: what does the blood collect as it flows through the capillaries of the body? And the second question is, what color is the blood that empty into the right atrium? If by asking these two questions, what kinds of, now first let's look at the first one. What kinds of the outcome do you expect? What kinds of cognitive activity do you expect to occur? We will say the first one is to recall, right? You look at that question. So that is and if you look at what color is the blood, and it's also remember and describe, right? So these questions, if you ask you as a teacher, you really want the students to remember things. You're not really, if you try to intend to ask them to analyze things, these two questions will not work. So it is very important that the kinds of questions you ask will help the students learn. And let's look at the second set of questions. What color would the blood in the right atrium be if, for some reason, it failed to pick up carbon dioxide or distribute oxygen in the body? And the second question is, what might be the difference between blood in the right and the left sides of the heart? By asking these two questions, obviously these two sets of, and this sets of question is different from the previous one. It intended for a different thing. Who can tell me, by looking at the first question, what kinds of learning outcomes or learning activity could occur, and the learning outcomes in relation to their activity will
They
be?
almost have to recall and compare and contrast to what
Correct.
they've learned before.
Yes. So that level is, the compare and contrast is a very different level than just a recall, right? They're based on what they remember. Now they get into a deep level. Very good. And the second one is, now let's see. Yes, try to infer, right? And the second one is compare. This is the reason the first is infer, make an inference is, it kind of if it has asked a scenario, if it failed to come up, So if it failed to come up, what could happen? So you want the students to make inference, what could happen? That's a high level thinking because you really have the good knowledge about that, understand the content, and then try to make a judgment. That's a very high level. The second one is compare, okay? Now we kind of get it, we're exposed to a little bit, with the example about what is the difference between, deep and shallow. Let's look at another example, okay? I want you to take a look. There are 6 pictures. They're all, bird's skull, right? And take a look. First, tell me any difference between 2 sets. The top are the 3 and the lower are the 3. There are 2 different sets. Can you tell me any difference? What could relate to their behavior?
Well, I mean, it looks like the second set, if those are the ones on the bottom, it's like their eye sockets are formed differently, which could mean that they may not have the same kind of ability of sight as other birds.
Okay, so yes, what kinds of bird that could be? Why they have a larger eye socket, right? Do you see that? The second, right? Why do they have that? Need a bigger one. So we probably can infer that they are nocturnal because they have more lights coming into it. The top part, they're probably like a daytime, right? They just fly around. At night, they have to sleep because they cannot see. Whereas the second sets, those kind of birds, they can absorb the light even in the very dark, dim time, right? So they are more nocturnal, like owl, those kind of birds, right? They have a big eye socket. Okay, so now in relation to that, we want to ask questions to help them to think differently, right? These are the first 2 sets of question. Which group of birds have larger eye sockets? Which group of birds have more hooked beaks? Because these are the different, right? So these questions help students just to remember the things, okay? I would say the first group has larger eye sockets, and the second one has smaller, and the second one larger. So you remember the facts. And the first group and the second group has a more hooked beaks. So it just remember the facts. But if you ask a question like that, how does the difference in eye sockets determine birds' predatory behavior, right? Now that kind of is like you train the students like a scientist. That's usually how the scientists ask the questions, right? So this is, we see that the first set we'll describe as a shallow level, the second one as a deep level question. So implication for assessment is shallow question is for remember things, reproduce, recall, and deep questions is require inference, reasoning, and application, okay, analysis. And these are some of the prompts, and they'll help you if you want to make a prediction. And these are the prompts I put over here. They'll help you to ask a question, generate question that will for prediction. And the next 4 level is comprehension, application, analysis, and synthesis. I'm not going to repeat that, just for your information as you work on today's assignment. If you want to generate question at deep level, and for the certain purpose, for example, you want to target at application, and then probably these are the good prompts. The question help you, you can generate, but they're not exhaustive list. There are other things. I just give you some example here. Okay, so these are the, I just to provide some very conceptual understanding of what, deep and shallow questions are, okay? And what deep and shallow cognitive processes are and the outcomes, we also discuss the outcome. The next is part of this class is how you create, how you use the video, because the video is often used. Video is a very rich resources. It has a lot of information, and usually it's more authentic, and the teacher like to use them, especially when you teach science or even teach like history, right? And these are the great resources for you to integrate into your classroom. But without asking deep or shallow question, or you just keep on asking, let the students watch the video, probably they don't get much. Or even you just ask those questions, want them to memorize things, and then you probably end up at very little about what you want the students to learn, right? Therefore, you want to make sure that you have the skills to develop both shallow and a deep question. That is, you want them to remember the facts and the concepts, but you also want them to apply, to analyze, okay? And there are several tools you can, to add questions to the videos. We call it annotate, right? You can, I put a few, online cloud-based software here. The top one is the Edpuzzle, okay? And then the next one, the playposit, and the TED Ed. All these video editing tools are useful and helpful for adding deep and shallow questions. In this class, we're going to use playposit because it is free. And in the future, when you try to integrate, and this is a great the resources to use, okay? Okay, so I'm going to play this first. And probably I will pause a little bit, and as we go along. First, you need to open a browser. You need to create an account for yourself.
Hello, this video is here to show you how to set up and use your playposit account. So the first thing that you need to do, obviously, is go to playposit.com.
So type playposit.com into your browser.
And we are going to join here to
And by join, she means sign up.
And use your playposit account.
Yeah.
So the first thing that you need to do, obviously, is go to playposit.com, and we are going to join. Once you get here, obviously, you're going to click I am an instructor and fill out.
So now you're here. You click join, means you sign up, okay? And then it requires this information. So please make sure you select I'm an instructor, but that will give you a lot of features you need, okay? Not just as a student. Okay, let me go to the next.
This sign up here. What I would recommend doing, however, is to sign in with your Google account, because it just makes things a little bit easier, and then you don't have to remember passwords and create a whole new account. It's just, they work with Google, and so it makes things a little bit easier. I don't know if you can see this, but we're just going to allow. It'll bring us to our main homepage.
At the end, when you finish the sign up process, you'll come to this like a page. You don't see those here because you haven't created any projects yet, okay? Later, when you add more and more project, you will see, different project which you created, but you don't have yet. But you do see the, they call these called the bulbs, okay? Just like new slides or new project, okay? Just use a different name. And what you need to do is going to go click on the new, okay? I'm going to play the video again.
Yours will not look like this the first time that you log in, obviously, because I have made a few bulbs, is what they're called. The first thing that you're probably going to want to do is create a class.
Okay, so go to new and select class, okay? So when you click this one, it depends on, it has 4 choices. You want your class folder as a green, blue, light purple or dark purple. Then you can, and name the class, like you say, okay, geometry class, or geometry class for 2nd grade, right? Or English class for 1st grade. You just give a name, okay? And I'm going to play
This is what your students will use to view your videos and actually use them and answer questions.
Yeah, question? Russell, I heard you have a question.
Yes, the create class did not come up. It came up with video segments and add a video.
Okay, that's not very important. So let's skip that. If
Okay.
you don't have that option, that's okay. But I'm going to play it anyway, okay?
Questions, and then you'll be able to see their scores and how they did on your video. So we'll just call this an example class, and we'll do light purple because that's a color that I like. And so you should be able to, over here on the left-hand side, see our example class. Obviously, our folder is empty.
So this part is, if you don't see this class option, this is just informational, because you create a class and then you include the students into your classroom. But at this point, we don't have any students, right? We just one user, okay? This is assume that you are teaching a class, and then you will add students to this classroom, and then they will be able to watch the video, and you will be able to, the advantage of this is you as a teacher, you will be able to observe who watched the videos, how many times they watched, and how long they spend. Those statistics, right, help you to understand how the students engage in the material. Okay, so I'm going to go pretty quickly on this and then go to the main part of lecture.
Because we don't have any students yet. If you go to students again, you won't be able to see any. And as a student, you'll want to give them either, as you see, I went up here to join class. So learners will use this code here to join a class, and they'll get prompted of that when they sign in, or you can just give them a link and they can click on it and will be automatically enrolled in a class. So that's up to you, but that's how you get your students in your class. And you'll know they're in your class. For instance, we can take a look at one of mine. You'll know they're in there when you click on Spanish 2, period 2, which is the class I have this year. And we go to students, and there they are. So that's how you create a class. The next thing that you're going to want to do is obviously create what we call a bulb. A bulb is what playposit calls your interact.
So right now, please go to new, select a bulb, okay? And you should be able to see this page on my screen.
Video. So it's telling playposit to use a certain video, and then it's you going in and adding certain questions to make sure that your students are paying attention and that they understood what you're trying to show them. So once you...
Okay, so you kind of get it, right? The purpose of this is the software has the ability, you can go to search and search within this video, this software, within the software, you will be able to search because it's automatically connected with the YouTube, and search the video you want, okay? And then once you get the video, then the next one is the main feature of this software is you will be able to add a question, insert a question in the video at the different places. For example, you teach them like a biology, like a DNA, for example. So at the beginning, the video talk about the definition of the DNA. At the end of that section, you add a question, is tell me, maybe multiple choice, they will select the correct, definition for DNA, for example, right? And then the next one, it become more advanced, and it depends on the content. It's talk about the application. Then you will add, the question which is different from the first one, which is just at a simple level, shallow level. You will ask a more deep level question. For example, what happened if this and that? And that will be for students to make inference. And by asking those questions along the way in the video, the students become more engaged in deep level thinking, okay? So you understand the feature of this software, okay? So I'm going to play again. Continue.
You click on new bulb, it'll bring you here. You can obviously use different bulbs that you've made or different recordings that you've done, but I think the easiest thing that you can do is just to use a YouTube video. So you can either go to YouTube like this and copy and...
Okay, at this point I want you to open another browser and type youtube.com, okay? And then go to youtube.com, find a subject you like, for example, history, okay, World War II, okay, or you want to find a math, for example, math for geometry, okay, and just like this one, the author just go to the YouTube, and then once you find the video you want, okay, you go to the URL and copy that one, you highlight and Control C if that's a PC, okay, you copy this video, the URL address, and we'll save it for the next step. Okay, are we good? Can we move on? Okay, and if you're ready, we're going to the next level.
Paste your link, excuse me, and paste it here, or you can search.
Okay, so here, you go back to your playposit, and you see here, because in your here, you should have an empty field, which is for you to put, it says enter the video URL, okay? So you can add the URL here. And click add, and the YouTube video will show up right here, okay?
On the right-hand side, it said YouTube, and you can search that way as well. But it'll show a little picture of the video that you want to show, and we should be able to add it after that. So here's our.
Yeah, click add, and you probably have the same screen like this in the YouTube, okay? Before she talk about this one, I give you a little bit heads up. And this one, you see at the left in this little triangle, which obviously you know that is you can play the entire video, okay? And the middle part is there's like orange kind of ish button with the middle of this menu, right? Different menus. This one is if you click on that, you will be able to add a question, okay? So she's going to tell you, introduce these features.
Video, and it'll tell us great job for adding it. And now is the part where you add the interactive piece to it. So basically what I recommend doing is listening to the video yourself and adding in questions where you want your students to really understand what's happening. So for instance, if we are here and I'm watching my video.
Okay, the infinitive verb.
Okay, so you don't have to go through the very detail of your video yet. I want you to just go a little bit to maybe 5 seconds, let it go a little bit, okay? We just practice how we add a question to it. Let's play a little bit. So it's the progression bar is sort of like maybe 5 seconds or 10 seconds, okay?
And I'm listening to him.
The original form of a verb.
Okay, so we learned that the infinitive is the original form of the verb. So now if I go to this little orange box here, I can add a question. And depending on if you have the free playposit or if you decided to pay for it, it's gonna let you do different things. I personally like the multiple choice and free response just to see that kids are getting it. And so we can add our option.
Okay, so you click on that and you select multiple choice. Okay, let's do the multiple choice first. And you just randomly add a question. Okay, the stem, right? The multiple choice, the stem for the multiple choice, the question, okay? And then add option, answer option here, okay? So I'm going to play along and you just practice.
If you have the free playposit or if you decided to pay for it, it's gonna let you do different things. I personally like the multiple choice and free response just to see that kids are getting it. And so we can add our option, and I think he said what is the original form of the verb called. Obviously, I would phrase it a little bit better than that if I were doing this for my student. Oops, excuse me. And then we have to add our answers because we chose multiple choice. So I'm going to put infinitive verb. I'm going to spell it correct, though, because it's really important to spell words correctly. Infinitive, I believe that's spelled correctly now, or conjugated verb. And we'll say conjugated verb. And then because it's multiple choice, you are going to select the answer that is correct, and then you're going to save it. And then at 57 seconds, right after he said that, this will pop up for students to answer. And obviously we can add more questions. You can do a free response or.
Okay, so I like you to drag the video progression bar a little bit forward and create a new multiple choice yourself. You go to the brown button, then you just select multiple choice, and we just practice. So the question, whatever you ask, it doesn't have to really match the content in your video. Okay, and you add a few answers and make sure you selected the correct answer and click done. So you should have 2 questions in your video. Okay. And I'm going to fast forward. The rest is the same. You can select the other choice, for example, true or false, and other forms. Okay. But you can watch the video then and actually play around it. It's pretty intuitive. And I'm going to come to this part.
And change the name so it doesn't just say new bulb. If you didn't like some of the questions, you can always go back and change it. But it will show up here in your first bulb. And then when you're ready, we go to this this arrow line thing, and we go to share it. So you can, again, give it to kids to share using this link. And all you have to do is click and it'll copy it for you. And these are the different settings that you can choose. If you're just sharing it to professionals, obviously we would click on this one because we don't want them to take it as a student. You can require learners to authenticate depending on what you want your kids to do. So that's how you create a bulb, and you can assign them to different classes as well. So that's the basics of how we do playposit. Let me know if you have any questions. My email is weiss.megan@ebsd9.
Okay, so what this video is actually basically tells, and teach you how to sign up and then how to select a video from the YouTube and put that URL in your playposit. And then you just use the brown button and play the video and use the brown button to add the question at various times, okay, in the video. But at the end, it talk about you can share with a professional, use a link, but that's not what we really want, because for this class, you want to have this playposit show directly your link to your Weebly and show the video directly in your Weebly. And that video doesn't tell you that step. So I'm going to go to the next one. Actually, I created. And first, before we move on, keep your playposit open, okay? And then if you have a browser open, just an empty browser open, log into your Weebly. Open your Weebly at the same time. And this is only 2 minutes video, very short, and it will tell you step how you copy the URL in the playposit and put into your Weebly. Okay, that's what you expect to do for this assignment. Actually, you're going to add the video, add the questions, and eventually show it directly in the Weebly. Okay, so this video is the steps, tells you how to put it into your Weebly. Are you ready with both open? Okay, so I'm going to play this video, okay? We just watched the playposit tutorial. Assume you have created several bulbs. Next, we want to learn is how to make this playposit movie show directly in Weebly. Let's look at the first bulb, which I have several here, and go to the far right and click on the menu under the action and select collaborate. Okay, I'm going to pause a little bit, just let you catch up. If you didn't quite catch, first you still stay in your playposit, and in this the home page where you have created a new bulb, right? Then you go to see the bulb, and under the action, select the collaborate, okay? And the next. With this one, you want to click on the advanced settings and turn on show embedding code. Then click copy button. So that part is, if you can turn this on, the embedding coding, and then you click copy, you're done with your playposit. You minimize that one, don't close it, just in case you want the code again, okay? Don't close it yet. Minimize it and go back to your Weebly. So next I'm going to play the Weebly. This means you have copied the code of your playposit video. Close. Next, open the Weebly website. Here I already created a page called the playposit video. Now let's go to the. Okay, I'm going to pause here. I want you to go to, you have the Weebly open, right? Click on the menu page, okay? Create a new page, and it could be this assignment. That will be the learning activity 4, okay? So name it as learning activity 4, create a new page. Once you name it, and you click on the build, then you will be able to see this. And you temporarily put here the title, you can name it learning activity 4. You can revise later because you're going to add like, you know, like the other assignment. You put like a standards, learning activity, preparation. You can add those stuff later, okay? And we just want to practice how, because at the end of this page, you want to put the video. Then we just practice that part, okay? Now, once you're in a build, if you're ready with me, and we're going to go on now. Left, and to look at the tools on the toolbars. One of these is called embed code. So I'm going to drag this and place it over here. And this object has the text which says, click to set custom HTML. Remember, we just copied the code from playposit, and we're going to paste over here. So let's click on this text, and the small dialog box pops up, and click edit custom HTML. And if you have PC, you just Control V to copy the code and click outside this box. You know, for this assignment, you don't want to create a link and a link to the playposit. That's not correct way. You want to have the video directly show inside the page. Okay? Video, Weebly. Click publish. And click the link to publish it. Go to the page playposit. No, I name it playposit. And see if it works.
Do you recognize this molecule? This is DNA, or deoxy.
Yeah, it works perfect. Okay, so this is the entire process, okay?